CSS is a cascading style sheet, and what CSS does is to describe the style of an HTML document. The syntax for CSS is given in this form: a set of a selector and a declaration block. The selector that you're going to be using is either an HTML element or an attribute of HTML, or at the same time a class or an ID that you're going to define, all of which are going to be used within the HTML. Then we have a declaration, a property value pair. And in this example, what you have is a P element. This is the HTML now element. Now this P tag is our selector. And the property value pair that we have is the color, which is changed to red, and the text, which is being aligned to the center. We have different selectors that we use, 5 of them. So the 5 selectors, one is what we call a simple selector. We have the combinator selector, we have pseudo class selector, we have pseudo element selector, and we have attribute selector. So let me look at them down here. The CSS element selector selects HTML elements based on the element name. So like an example here is a P tag, which has been selected, and we change the property. So if I wanted to change the property of the heading tag, then I would have to select the heading tag by its name, which is H1 or whichever heading I want to select in that case. So the ID selector, it uses the ID attribute of an HTML element to select a specific element. So you need to have added an ID attribute. That ID attribute that you add on the HTML element is the one that you're going to define a style for it within the CSS code. So an example here is this. So what we have is here within the style tag, where we are defining the style, we have, now what we have defined here is an ID. So an ID is defined using this hashtag. So you have hashtag and the name of the ID that you're changing. Now, if you see within the body tag, the body section of the website, I have this 2 paragraphs, one which has hello world, and the other one which has this paragraph is not affected by the style. Now, if you look at the code on my right, is that only the hello world is, this paragraph is the one that has the color having been changed to red and being centered. Now, the reason is this ID here, which has been defined, is only being accessed within the P tag. So it, and you know that always an ID attribute is unique to every specific element that you're using. So this is something to note when you're defining your element. Now, if I was to change the ID here, maybe I can call it para, and I once again click on the run, you realize now also this paragraph is also not formatted. Now, the reason as to why it is not styled as we would have wanted is because, once again, the style here, the ID attribute is different from the ID that is defined. So if I was to change the name of the ID also to par, now that's the only time it's going to have the same kind of a formatting. So that is something to note when you're defining a selector through an ID. So if so that is the ID selector. Then the other selector is what we call a class selector. So a class selector selects the HTML elements with a specific class attribute. So now you need to add another attribute, which is called a class. So this attribute or the class is defined using a period character, which is given here, or a dot. That is a period character. That is what is used to define a class. And I'm going to show an example here. So here we have the style tag within the head section. And you can see it has the center Now this center is preceded by a dot or a period. Now this is the name of a class. If you look at these two tags, the heading 1 and the p tag, they have an attribute called class. And this attribute called class has the value of center, which is the name of the class here. So, and if you look on the right hand side, you can see now the heading 1 and the p tag, they are all centered and they also have the color as red. Let me add an ID here. So this, I'm going to call it my style. And having defined that, the color is going to be blue. And now instead of the class here, this one I'm going to give it, I'm not going to align it. So this one I'm going to give it the ID as my style. Then I click on the run. Now you realize that the heading 1, because I have added an ID attribute and I have already defined that ID within my style, then you can see what is applied on heading 1, the H1 here is the attribute for the color, which is blue, and this is the one that is given there. So the default alignment of the H1 is to the left, and that way you can see it has been aligned to the left. But for the p tag, which is still centered, and also the color is red, is taking this property of the class, which has already been defined using the center. And that's why you can see it is an attribute class and having the value center. So the other way to have a selector is using what we call a universal selector. So a universal selector is used to select all elements on the page. So whenever you use a universal selector, it is going to select every element that is within that page where you have applied the CSS style. And it uses an asterisk character, which is given here. So you can see now what we have defined within this style is the universal selector, and it is defined by the asterisk. So this asterisk is the one that is defining these two properties and the value for them. And you can now see the heading 1 and the 3 paragraphs, all of them have the color to the as blue, and they aligned to the center. Last one is what we call the grouping selector. It selects all the HTML elements which have the same style definition, and you list them together and then you define the code for them. And an example for that is this. So you can see here, I have the heading 1, heading 2, and the P being given by this. So all of them, they are centered and they are red. So instead of having to define the property and the value for heading 1, heading 2, and P separately, they have all been grouped together and they have the same property. Now, if I was to do away with the probably heading 1, like that, I delete that and I run, you're going to realize now the heading 1 is going to appear by default the way it is always set. And then it's only now the heading 2 and the P tag which are grouped in this case. The way to add CSS to your HTML document, there are 3 ways. One is the external CSS. Then we have the internal CSS, and we have the inline CSS. The external CSS, this one we use a link element inside the head section of the HTML document, which is given like this. And then you define the source for the file that you want to add in this case, because this is supposed to be now an external file. This one is available online. So here you have the link element, and is calling this my style.css. And you can see now what we have down here is that the background color for the body is bluish, navy blue. And then you can see the heading 1 is centered. And then I think the paragraph is just by default. Now, if I comment away this section and then I run, you realize the page is now to default setting. So the default settings here is that the heading 1 comes to the very beginning, the same thing with the paragraph, and the default color is black. Now the reasoning for this is that the style which was being defined by this link file is now not available within this, this document. The internal CSS is given by the style element inside the head section. This is an example of internal CSS, which is inserted using the style tag, and the style tag within it you define your code. Then the last way to add the CSS is through what we call the inline CSS. So with the inline CSS, this one is applied uniquely to every HTML element, which is inserted through the style attribute. So an example here is this. So you have the heading 1 here, and then we have a style attribute. And this style attribute is the color, which is blue, and the text, which is aligned to the center. For the p tag, you can see the color is red, and this is also a style attribute. We have mentioned the 3 ways in which you can add the code for the CSS. So one is what we have called the internal, which is the example given here. Now you can see here, I have this code given by the style tag, and what I have defined here is the style for the table. So the table, the table row, the table header, and the table data. So these are elements of HTML, all of them. Now a style I also want to define here within still the style tag. I want to define a style for heading 1. So H1, what I want to define here is to change the color. So I want the color property here to be red. Then probably also I can have text align, and I can align all the text for heading 1 to center. So that is something I have done on the document. But now this is what we call the internal style. So if I go back to my document, I know this list is a heading 1, and I think there are several others heading 1s in this document. But you realize mostly there's nothing that is in red color. But now if I refresh this document, you're going to realize that the list, which is a heading 1, now has the color as red, and it has been centered to, it has been moved to the center. The same way with the tables, it has been styled to the center and it is red, and the same way with the forms and the iframes. Because all these are heading 1s, they have been styled to the center. So what I have done is to change everything within my document with just one line of code. So anything that has heading 1 will be changed in this form. Now I want you to realize something. There's what we call a precedence in the way these styles are applied. And what happens is that what is within the head section is applied first, then whatever is in line is applied next. So I want to change something for the heading 1, which has the list. So this is the heading 1, which has list in this from our document. But something you're going to realize is if I add an inline style, so this is added through the style attribute. So if I change this and I say probably for this inline, I want the color to be blue, like that. So this is the one that is going to be applied last, which means it is going to overwrite whatever the heading 1 and is specified in this case. So if I go back to my document and I refresh this, you realize now the list has the color blue. Now the reason for this is that the inline CSS has more precedence than the internal one, which is now defined within the style tag. But now what I have in this case demonstrated is a way in which I can add this style either through the internal or through the inline one. Now, the other thing I want to show you is how to also add the style using an external file. So I'm going to create a new file within my my folder. So let me save this. So I'm going to save it within the styles folder, and this is supposed to be of type CSS. I can use this. And now this, what I want to have here is the, so let me call this my styles .css. So here with the my styles.css, let me show you what we have here. So this is a CSS file. Now we have created one within our styles page. So this is the one that is going to be used when we call this. So probably what I can define here is something like H1. So H1 here. So I can delete whatever is here as the H1. So I need to just add it there. Then I can delete it from here. So now what I need to add is the link tag. So this is the link tag. And on the href, I need to add the folder, I mean the file that has this tag. So it is the styles, my styles .css. So if you have that I have done through this external CSS file, which is given here, and I have added it through the link. The way we add a comment within CSS, we use this kind of syntax. So colors are specified using predefined color names. You can also use what we call the RGB values. You can use the hex values, the HSL, the RGBA, and SLA values. So these are a kind of codes that are used to represent the names of the colors. It can be either the color border that can be changed, something like this, which is given here. So you have heading 1 has a style of border, and then it has a color named tomato. So this will be the color of the border, and it is the one that which are shown in this case. The other one is blue, once again, the border, which is given here, and the other one is violet, which is also given here. So these are just examples. It is also the one that had been given here. You can change. So here we are changing the color of the text. So the text color is the one that has been changed here using the color and giving the name. Then, so that is when you're using the names and also a background here for heading 1 and a background for the paragraph. The other way to have the color values is using what we call the RGB values. So they can either be specified like this. So this is the way RGB values are provided, like this. So you give a certain value. This is the red, green, and blue, the way you combine them. Also, you have the HX1, XL, the way the values are given. So you can also give them in these percentages. And also you have the way the RGBA can also be combined. So you can also use them like this. So all these codes are different ways in which you can have the colors given. And based on whichever kind of color code you're using, you're going to get the different values. You can also change the background color. You can change the background image. You can also change the background attachment, and you can decide how you want the background property to be displayed. Do you want it to repeat? Do you want to change the position? So these are the different properties that you can change. So an example here is a background color for the page, and you can see it is given by this. So a background color here is given in this form, the body. So this is the body element within the HTML that we are saying we want to change the color, to light blue. I can change the background image here, and what I need to input is the URL for the image that I want to add on my page. I want you to check this example. The image which is given here as the paper, in this case, is the one that appears here, and you have used the background image on the style here, and you have it being displayed like this. Now, if I go back and I check on this, what they are calling the bad combination, if I click on this, you're going to realize now the text in this case, or the image and the text are not as clear. So this is one of the ways to ensure that what you're displaying within your page is going to be as clear. What happens by default is that the image is going to be repeated over the whole of the page. In this case, you can change the border for the different elements. So an example is that is given here is through the border style, and the border style that you can change in this case is the either on, now the way the borders are given, you can change the border that is on the top, on the bottom, on the right, or on the left. And this is the way they are given here. The border styles, we have the one that is dotted, the one that is dashed, the solid one, which is a solid border, and that one explains, the different kind of borders in this case. So an example is here. So all these styles which are indicated here, like the dotted one, which is given by border style dotted, are the ones which are given here. And you can decide on what side, once again, you want to give that border. So I think I can just demonstrate this one here. So you can see we have now this is using the internal one, the internal CSS. You have the border style, which is dotted here, and is the one that is given like this. So whenever you define a style, by default is going to be given the same way. You have another one which is dashed, and it's the one that is given here as the dashed. So if like now I do away with the first one, like this one in this class, and I run this, you realize the first one, a dotted border, is now, this is just a normal p tag, and it does not have that border being displayed. So for all these others, they have the different styles which are being shown in this case.